Welcome to episode 12 of the Purpose Pursuit Podcast with Tim Batts, where we help you find your purpose, focus on it, and build a life you're proud of, mentally, spiritually, financially, and physically. Today we got a powerhouse in the building, AdrianMaclin, a leader and educator, a musician, and most importantly, a man of purpose. From the classrooms of Cordova High School to Carnegie Hall, from shaping young musicians to winning a Grammy Music Educator Award, Adrian is proof that when you commit to your purpose, doors that you didn't think would open. But let's be real, finding your calling ain't always a straight path. Today we're diving deep into how he found his purpose, the obstacles he had to overcome, and how he locked in on his. If you ever felt lost, unmotivated, or unsure of what your purpose is, stay locked in. This one's for you. But before we jump in, don't forget, if this episode speaks to you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and share with someone who needs it. Let's get into it. Who was Adrian growing up back in Memphis?
Adrian was definitely a joyful kid, a shy kid at that, a kid who was confident in his talent, someone who had big dreams, was definitely a church baby, and then at the same time was figuring himself out and was trying to figure out what makes him, how does that fit in groups with other people that are his age, how his peers going to perceive him. And so honestly, I was paranoid. I dealt with a lot of anxiety as a kid and never really realized that I did. But I was worried about what people, I always was in the back of my mind. Anytime I walked into a room, what are they thinking about me? What are they saying? And I didn't figure out that none of that mattered because the same people in the room that I'm thinking are looking at me and trying to figure out who I am, they're thinking the same thing about me. And I think I realized that once I got to college, and that kind of changed. But growing up, just a happy kid that had big dreams.
You could have pursued anything as it relates to a career, but you chose music. What pulled you in and kept you there?
So I was a church baby, and my mom doesn't sing. I think my dad, she says, I'm not a good relationship with my dad, or a consistent relationship, better, let's say it that way. And so she says that he sings. We don't know where the singing came from. But I just had this attraction to choirs, and it was different types of choirs, but mainly gospels where it started. But then I became this kid who, during the holidays, had to watch everything on PBS. So I knew about the Mormon Tabernacle. I knew about the BYU singers, Brigham Young singers. I was watching all this choral music, operas, and so I don't know why I was so interested in that early on in life. And so when I got to middle school, I was given the opportunity to direct the church choir, do some directing at middle school. Then when I got to Overton, around so many greats, and then I saw Lula Hedgeman, the director, Ken Eichels, the assistant, and I watched the impact that they had on students. And I knew my junior year that I wanted to be a high school choir director. Now, here's what's funny. I saw myself being some type of performer. I thought I might do Broadway. And I was like, I can't dance. So that ain't for you. Then I said, okay, maybe I could be some type of, R&B singer. But then I started listening to all those folk in choir, and I was like, you don't sing like them, so you need to give up that. So then I said, maybe I can write music. That never went anywhere. Maybe I can be a producer. I don't know if I, really know how to do that. So I saw myself as a kid wanting to be on the Grammys. I saw that. I was like, I'm going to be on the Grammys. Matter of fact, guy, Cortland Whalum, who now performs in our city, part of the Whalum clan, he and I were having a conversation, and I feel like we were on the phone watching the Grammys, and we were telling each other, you're going to be on the Grammys first. And Cortland was like, no, it's going to be you that's going to be on the Grammys. And I, later on, I was like, I ain't going to be on nobody's Grammys because that, I have nothing in the music industry. But then my junior year, I started directing more and teaching choirs more. and saw that as a passion and a joy. And my cousin and another young lady, Keshana Turner, they were auditioning for Allstate. Shawnee Foster, cousin. They were auditioning for Allstate. We all were auditioning for Allstate, and I started coaching them through, just little mere things. This is what you need to do. Fix this. Well, here, be, I was doing all of that, and we went and we auditioned for Allstate, and they made it. I didn't.
Really?
I went upset. Not a tear. I mean, like, I really remember the feeling on the inside. Like, I'm getting it now. It was just like this burning. Like, I was so excited. Like, I helped y'all. I was celebrating them more and I was first alternate. I didn't make the choir, but I went upset. And it was at that moment that I really knew this is what you want to do for the rest of your life. I was the librarian. I was the student conductor. I was vice president. I was following it all up behind Mr. Eichels, Miss Hedgeman. Got to school early to go to the choir room, spent lunch in the choir room. Then when school was out, we got out at 3:15. I was still in the choir room. I just realized then this is what you need to do for the rest of your life.
So the fact that you saw them win it and do well, you saw that was kind of the defining moment of your purpose, right?
Yeah.
To be able to pour into somebody and actually still like it was I would imagine it was almost like you won.
It felt like that.
Yeah.
It really did. It felt like that. I was just so happy. I mean, like, I was really, really happy. And they get to go to Nashville for a week. And I stay in Memphis at Overton. but I wasn't upset. Like, there was no bone in me that was angry. Nothing about it. I was just excited that they got a chance to go. I mean, I eventually made it my senior year and got a chance to experience it. But I knew then that choirs is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I saw how Miss Williams treated us and the respect and the love that she had at Colonial. When Miss Hedgeman passed, the number of people that came back and said my life was changed because of this woman, just, being in her class 2 hours for 156 days or however long the school year is. I wanted to have that same type of impact on those around me.
You probably won't believe this, but yours truly directed choirs too.
Oh, really?
Church choir.
Get out of here. Now I get mad because now what? And Carlton Little is another that sings, and he'll be all on Facebook singing. I'm like, dude, why weren't you in choir?
Yeah.
Like, we went through middle and high school together, and you never sang.
I think we were more focused on sports though.
Yeah.
And so I didn't direct the choir in my youth. I did it in my adult life.
Wow.
Like right out of college, my dad has a church.
Okay.
And so it's just naturally involved in it and directing the choir. I was like a baby Kirk Franklin, man.
Yeah, no, they call me Baby Kirk.
Oh, really?
You'd be like Big Kirk.
Yeah. But no, man. So when you were talking about that, that actually took me back to the fact, like, you know what? I direct the choir. Probably not to your level.
Well, I don't even know if it's anything that, as a director, I do anything different from anyone else. There are those that are very charismatic in their directing, and then there are those that are very reserved and those that are very structured. And then I think all of us are passionate in it, in our own way.
Yeah.
I think it's just the connection that you build with those that are in front of you.
I think the biggest, I naturally coach, and I think sometimes when you on I would say Sunday. On Sundays, you just see the results of the practice, right?
Right.
So it's like all the hard work already went in. So it's like when I was directing, it was just the thrill and trying to get different voices to kind of align and be on one accord, whether we were in harmony or whether we were in unison or whatever, right? And then like I got a thrill out of just doing that. I would imagine the fact that you're pouring in just to piece things together to where people sound good, that will probably, it has to make you feel good to be able to do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, whether it be at church, whether it's with my community choir, the Memphis Men's Chorale, or if it's at school, every individual person is a piece to this master, this final masterwork that you're putting together, and how you inspire those individuals to bring their talents together, it matters. So each one needs attention. Each one needs a certain type of encouragement. Each one needs pushing, fussing, pruning. But I think the magic of that is the person in front being able to speak to each individual person in a mass setting, because that's also an art as well. Because you can't just single one singer out when you got 40 others there. Your words have got to be where every person can relate and be able to bring their talent together to bring this one voice part to match all the other voice parts to bring about this sound.
So what's your process? Like if you were, let's say you're training somebody or teaching somebody how to direct, like what would be their process? Not I would say more or less um, high level, but like
hmm
what's your process for getting a choir together or training?
Um, so if so part of my job that I do with Memphis Shelby County Schools, I work as the content lead for secondary choirs, which is middle and high school. So I get a chance to be a resource to teachers, sounding board that they can just call and maybe vent or if they need information. And then there are some coaching opportunities that I get to do that. And I love doing that. When I started teaching as a first year teacher, made a bunch of mistakes, a bunch of mistakes. And the biggest mistake that I was making was I did not know how to communicate to the students in front of me. I was prepared for them to make fun of me.
Mm.
I was prepared for them to check me. Again, here going back to childhood, wondering what everyone else in the room is saying about me. And I didn't realize that I was the conductor of this ship, this train. Didn't realize that. And so I tell novice teachers all the time, you go in the room and you be yourself. You know how to do this job. And your goal is to have those kids come in the room where they are and you meet them. Don't make them meet you, or it just any choir. You meet them where they are. When I took on the Memphis Men's Chorale, it started out with maybe it was I want to say about 10 men in there. And I'm not gonna say that they were the, well polished or professional singers, but they weren't, at a starting point. They had some singing experience. They just didn't know how to bring their talents together. So how do I go in the room to motivate them? There's times that you have to model the sound that you want, but then modeling is one thing. I'm always thinking, how can I explain to these singers how to make this sound? How can I paint a picture and tell them what I want? I have this thing now that I use in different rooms just to break the ice to get people to be comfortable to laugh. And so I'm like, okay, if there's a word or a consonant that I need them to pop, I'm like, all right, flick the booger. And so that they immediately start laughing. Now we're laughing. Now they're comfortable. Now the tension is broken, and so they want to make music. So being genuine in front of the group, and then knowing where you want the sound to be. We always tell teachers, don't teach to the choir that's in your head, teach the choir that's in front of you. And so that just about any good director is saying that. And so I know what I want them to sound like in my head, but they may not reach that. So, and it's okay. How do I get them to be as close to the sound that's in my head? And when they get there, regardless if they mess, my face matters as well. What I'm doing with my face is communicating with them. It's not just the words, it's my body language, bringing all of that. So um, I get a chance to coach a lot of directors, and I'm telling them this is what you need to do when you conducting the ictus. When you're doing that, all of this matters and be from the wrist. Someone told me this. It's not anything. It comes from me asking people. It comes from me observing other directors, uh, and then making it Adrian.
Many people think purpose is just what you do, but for you, music isn't just music; it's mentorship. Why is that so important to you?
Um, I believe my life, not a belief. I know that my life was changed because of the impact of music. It wasn't just the songs, it wasn't the melodies, it wasn't the performances that were great. It was those individuals that were in front of me and how they took time not to just worry about Adrian the singer, but Adrian the person. And so that village, gosh, that village raised me, you know. They raised me in a time where a young boy did not have the encouragement of his dad. Mom was there. And there's a 9-year difference between my sister and I. And so I had to step up and be a big brother. I had to step up and figure out how a man should carry himself because there were nothing but women, and how to deal with peer pressure, people questioning and asking and checking and talking about you. Um, and I would go to church, and it would be the deacons, Elder Burton, who's still there. I would stand next to him in the choir stand. He couldn't rock, and he'd be rocking off beat, and I'd be rocking off beat right, right with him. It was Marvell Mitchell, who I had the biggest crush on his daughter at the time. We're best friends now, so Cos, if he watched this, he won't get upset. But um, I watched Marvell, and I watched how he carried himself, and I never saw him stress. Ronald Claxton, my goddad, he was the minister of music at the time, and he saw the musician in me. He saw the aspiring director in me, and he was like, "Hey, I got 3 sons. Adrian can spend the night over here anytime he wants to." And I watched how I grew up, and I tell Ron this now. I'm like, "Dad, I feel like you're the richest man in the world. I never saw him not open his wallet and do what he could for other people." Um, Kevin Davison. He looked at me and he was like, "You're a director." He gave me the encouragement. I never said anything to him that I wanted to direct choirs, but he saw that. So I have all of these people and others who stepped up. Lenore Herring, my spiritual mom. She would stop and talk to me and say, "Adrian, you need to do this, son. Don't think of it this way. Have you tried this? I'm looking at you. You better read them scriptures before you teach the choir the song." Allison Burton, who I watched and admired her directing, Nikki Parti. It was a village. It really was. And so when I saw what they were doing, not just for me, but for others, again, I went back to that moment. I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I got into school choir and I saw Pam Williams, Lula Hedgeman, and I saw what they were to kids. I want to be do the same thing. And so it's not just music. When I go in my room, if you talk to any of my students, they'll tell you, dude is like a father. He's a coach. He's gonna sit there. He's a social worker. He's a psychologist, and he just used music as his mechanism to get to us. And so that's my purpose. To if I can touch the hearts and the minds of those in front of me, that I make some small change, may not be the biggest change, but some small change, then I know my life is being purposeful in the classroom.
Now I listen, to you say that, and I think of how important it is to have positive influences. I think of how negative influences could change the trajectory of someone's life too as well. But just to hear you say, "Hey, my dad wasn't there. However, God placed these men in my life to where they were kind of father figures at different segments or with different situations that actually played a role into actually putting you or throwing you into your direction of where you needed to go." I just, hearing that, I think is amazing. I think it's a blessing because it could have easily gone a different direction for you.
Oh, it definitely could. And here's the thing. You mentioned those negative influences. They were there as well. I'm not gonna say that I ignored them. I have this thing when I tell kids all the time, and I tell friends this. I'm like, "Hey, I don't and I I don't delete. If I have a disagreement with someone, I don't delete them off Facebook, off social media or anything like that. Um we have our disagreements, however they are, whether, I've caused them or that other person has caused them. I just pull back from the person and I watch, and this is the part, I watch them glow so they can watch me glow. And I always point out, notice how we glow without one another. And that lets me know that some folk are just not meant, we're not meant to be in their lives. And that was a hard thing that, you know, I had to accept, is that all of these people that may have meant stuff for my bad, it turned out to be, we hear that all the time in church, but it turned out to be for my good. Like it really did. So I'm even grateful for those experiences that were bad.
Yeah.
I'm not angry or mad about them, but they helped build and shape me to who I am.
Right. Some things placed or people placed in your life are there for a purpose to reveal a greater purpose, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Every purpose-driven person has a defining moment. What was the turning point in your life when you knew you were exactly where God wanted you to be?
Uh, I think that moment honestly came when I got to Cordova. I really do. I think it got there. So going back to this thing where I said, directors should teach to the choir that's in front of them and not the choir in their head. And so I got to Cordova and I literally saw a bunch of kids, saw a really good neighborhood. You finna have a stellar program. No. It was definitely not that. And good friend of mine, Ron Fisher, who's at the University of Memphis. He's no longer there. He's now in Miami-Dade in Ohio, at the university there. And so Ryan had just come to Memphis, just moved to Memphis from Arkansas. It was my first year at Cordova, and he said, "Hey, I want to come and watch you teach. I want to come and see what you hang out with you for a day." And he hung out with me for a couple of days. Um, but it was on that first day. Ron and I didn't know each other that well, but he had a very charismatic personality, very welcoming, and so we laughed and talked most of the time throughout the day. At the end of the day, he came up to me. He said, "Why are you torturing these kids?" And I said, "I'm not torturing them." And he was like, "They're not ready for this song. You got them singing A-part harmony. They're barely matching pitch for unison." And I'm like, "Dude, you need to get up out of you don't know me that well. Get up out of my classroom." Um, but then took a step back because those words stuck with me. It bothered me. It hit a nerve. It struck a nerve. And it made me wonder, what are you doing? What is the purpose of this? Why are you pushing these kids to sound like a collegiate choir and they're not there yet? And when they leave out of the room, they're just walking to go to the next class. They should be singing to walk out of the room. They should be dying to stay in the choir room. You're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. And I think it was at that moment when he said that entire year, my whole concept of what I wanted to be the students, immediately changed. I watched kids, you know, I call Cordova Choirs a family. It's not a class. And that was a class. The kids were at each other's necks. Parents were making comments and suggestions. They just weren't happy. They were not happy. And it went them because who's the teacher in charge? So I had to go back and do some reevaluation in myself and decide what sacrifices do I want to make for this choir that's in my head to make sure that these kids are the best version of themselves that they can possibly be.
A lot of people may not be able to kind of check self or hold self accountable, right?
Yeah.
How did you get to a point to where it was like easy? I wouldn't necessarily say easy, but you knew you needed to check yourself. Like how did you get to that point?
My mom, I immediately went back to this word that my mom said to me when I was in high school. Adrian, you are arrogant. No, I'm not. I know. I mean, I'm 5'4", man. I'm not arrogant, but I started to see it. I started to see lack of better words. I started to see the cockiness in me. I really did. I started to see the big head. And I didn't want to be that person because again, I had this village that was not that. They were so giving, and I wanted my life to reflect what they had been to me. And so I always say that this is my way because I can never pay those people back. I wish I could. I can never pay those people back. And so this is my way of paying them back.
The music industry and education world aren't always easy. Were there moments you doubted yourself, and then how did you push through it?
Oh gosh, there are a bunch of moments that I doubted myself. Here's something that I don't do anymore. I don't compare myself to others. Because again, if I'm doing that, then I'm not building the best Adrian. I'm building the best Tim. And I can't beat Tim at being Tim. I just can't. I can't. And I think a lot of people should realize that, we're always, during our age coming up, Michael Jordan was the best. And I used to always wonder, who's going to come after Michael because Michael's going to eventually die. His basketball reached its plateau? Has it just stopped there? And no, that's not the case. We see LeBron, we see Kobe, we see all these other names that are coming out. And so same is here. I stopped judging myself based off of others and started doing more focusing on me. Um, Constantly pruning myself and being honest with myself that, hey, you gotta, you're constantly evolving. Even now this year, I don't teach the same way that I did when I first got to Cordova. So the impact that I want to make, I want it to continue to be reaching.
You've led choirs to perform in world-renowned spaces like Carnegie Hall. What did that first big moment feel like for you?
Oh gosh, I can remember that trip was horrible. Anything that could go wrong went wrong that trip.
Yeah.
My principal, Barton Thorne, he taught. That's one of the first time.
Now,
One
was
of the
this
first stories.
Cordova?
This was at Cordova.
Okay.
Yeah, 2018. It took 80, 78, 81 or so, something in there. Kids on an airplane to New York. And we were doing this festival called Choirs of America. Uh, One of our good high school buds, Tessful Wonder Magni, who called and was like, "Hey, man, you need to be doing this Choirs of America gig. They're gonna help you do this. I already told them they need to get you there." I said, "Okay, cool. We're gonna do that." And at that point I had been taking choirs out of town. I kind of figured out, how to go around travel agents and things like that. So I said, "We can plan this a la carte." I ain't never planned a trip for New York. I had no business trying to plan this trip myself, right? I've only been there as a part of groups, but as far as me being the person, I ain't never done that. Uh, so I started working on it on the trip. Got figured out a cost or something to keep this trip under 1,000. I know I can cut corners. I did it. Trip was like 975 somewhere in there, and it was to cover everything. And the very night before we were supposed to leave, I get a phone call from my booster treasurer, and she says, "Hey, Maclin, I paid this and paid that, and I was thinking that these other checks were gonna come in. They didn't come in. I didn't pay for the hotels." It's like 8 p.m. We leave Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Where am I get this money from? That was the first big mistake. Uh, but my principal told me, he said, call the parents and tell them what's going on. I said, well, I'll do that. So I sent out an email, did some phone calls, and said, hey, we had some issues going on here. If everyone can bring an additional 150, 175, $200, and there was I was shocked. I was so ready to get cussed out when folk got to Memphis International, and that's not what was happening. People were coming up, praying for me, handing me checks. I had parent, some parents to say, "Hey, max out our credit card. Just pay us back. We know the money's coming back. We know we're good for it." And I'm like, "How you know this? Well, you've taught our kids, so we're not worried about it." And Thorne stood there and he watched. He was like, "I'm gonna let him take the heat." And so we got on the plane. We flew to New York, and we got there. Hotel wasn't where we thought it was supposed to be. It was out in the borough. So that meant we had some travel time back and forth in and out of the city. Um, the day that we had the big rehearsal for Carnegie Hall, the bus company misread our itinerary and said, "Hey, we're supposed to pick." All we saw is drop y'all off at 10 a.m., pick y'all up at 10 p.m. They ain't read nothing in between. They said, "Come back, pick us up, take us to lunch, go change clothes." So here I am with my principal, a student teacher, trying to navigate 78 kids down the street on the subway, trying to get back to our borough to get our clothes so we can get back to Carnegie Hall. It's raining. They're hungry. I mean, it's just, a number of things. But I can remember that day when we got to Carnegie Hall and we had, there was a guy, a crackhead on the side of the street. I don't know why he started turning the kids. He just started saying, and I'm like, y'all, dude's a crackhead. Like, God bless him, but he don't know where y'all from. He said he put a bounty on our heads. I'm like, y'all, he's just trying to get a rise out of you. Get on the train. I walked over to him. I was like, dude, I'm their teacher. Walk away. I'm looking at him, but he walked off. He just walked. He respected it. Walked away. We got on the subway. Rode the subway back up to Carnegie Hall. Walked through Central Park, and we got to the front of the Carnegie Hall, and we've been rained on. We've been walking all day. We don't have our clothes. We performed at night, and the kids got right in front of Carnegie Hall, and they started cheering.
Mm.
and they started singing the school alma mater. And I mean, my eyes, even now thinking about it, um, I don't know if that moment was more important than the moment that we were actually on the stage, because those kids had endured a lot. Their teacher had endured a lot, and it was a lot. But for them to have gone through all of that and still see the joy of reaching Carnegie Hall, being able to go through the performance, uh, I think that moment when I realized, I said, I'm really making some impact. Most of our trips had been tied to roller coasters, theme parks. I'm a big kid, so I like those trips too. But this was the first trip where it was actually geared towards a stage, a serious performance. And nobody asked about where's the roller coaster? When we going shopping? It was all about Carnegie Hall. And they understood what that experience meant. And so I think then that's when I realized that, again, I was making some impact. It was another check mark.
You've been a mentor to so many young people. What was the most powerful transformation you've seen or witnessed in a student?
Um, it's so many. I can't single it down to one. I wish I could. Um, but I can sum it up in saying that seeing students. So it's weird because again, Cordova is a community where the majority of the students come in and they're two-parent homes. And a lot of times we look at families that are living what we think and believe is the American dream. They have it together. And we don't realize that everybody has some type of struggle, and they're dealing with different things. They're dealing, with identity and, financial issues or family issues. Everyone's dealing with something. And so to have kids come in the room, and I'm learning this now, even with my daughters being teenagers, that mom and dad don't always have the answer. So again, my words have to be words of guidance. And they have to be concise, thorough, and quick to the point. But they also got to be words that still match up with that household. You know, so I'm very mindful of the things that I say to students, especially the ones that are struggling. I've had kids come in dealing with depression, anxiety. Um, a couple of students that have wanted to commit suicide, don't feel like their value and their worth is not there. Um, Dealing with drug abuse, sexual abuse. Um, and you wouldn't think those type of things are happening, but they're happening everywhere. It ain't, to just a certain community or a certain race. Everyone is dealing with something. And so the number of students that I've had dealing with stuff, and they keep my number after graduating from Cordova, and they reach back out and they're like, Mr. Maclin, hey, I was at work today. My boss said this, and then somebody else did this, and somebody did this, and this other person did this, and then I got cussed out, and then my food went there, and I mean, and I'm like, okay, what did you do? I just took a breath and was like, well, accept the things that we can handle, accept the things that we can, and I kept on moving. Whereas this kid back in the day would have been punching a hole in the wall, ready to pop off. Um, so knowing that I'm reaching these kids, I had a kid, actually, I've had a couple of kids whose parents have said, hey, they ain't working out right now at the home. I ain't putting them out, but they need to take a break. Can they just stay with you for a week? You know, my daughters have inherited brothers and sisters um, that now have become a part of our families, and we have become a part of theirs. So being able to reach kids outside of music and being the type of mentor where they're talking about real life decisions um, make makes me want to make sure that the witness that I bear to them is always true.
If you could talk to every young person out there struggling to find their purpose, what's the first thing you would tell them to do?
Figure out your why. Definitely figure out your why. Um, a lot of times we don't figure out our why. We just do stuff to see the final picture. But why are we doing it? Why have a stellar core program? And here's what's funny. I always want to know, what value does the arts really have to students? Because a lot of times we can think, you know, final show, big musical, big concert band, big choir. We think those things, but if we're not realizing why we are doing it. So if I can tell any kid, figure out what your why is, why do you want to do this in life? What value and what purpose is it going to bring you and what joy is it going to bring you? Two, money is not everything. And I've had several opportunities to leave the places that I work for more money, and that would be beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But at the end of the day, does it bring me joy? And I know where I belong. I get paid every 2 weeks, and sometimes them weeks that ain't no pay week, I'm like, ugh. But it does not change me wanting to go into work each day. The money's not the issue. So I tell them that. And then lastly, make sure that you're doing your part to be a piece of this greater puzzle called life, because each puzzle piece counts. And where you are and how you fit in that puzzle matters. Figure out that.
A lot of people think finding purpose is just a big aha moment, but in reality, it's built over time.
Yeah.
How do you help young people recognize their gifts?
Uh, so for my class, it's easy because most times the kids they're with me more than just 1 year, you know. So I get a chance to go back and say, you remember how you was your freshman year? You remember how you was when you first came here? Where were you? And they're always shocked when I tell them the very first time we met, because they're like, you still remember that? I'm like, yeah, because when I met you, I didn't I didn't say at the end of, your high school career, this is going to be the same you. I want to see a different version. So I've kept that little snapshot in my mind, and I've watched you mature. I've watched you develop. I've watched you become who you are. And so being able to look at kids and help them figure out when their aha moments are, but how those aha moments came about is always a big thing. I always tell them, I got a kid this year, and he's still a little rough. He gonna leave me in May, but I remind him, dude. Remember when you first came here? You was cussing everybody out. You thought you was a big fish in in the little pond or whatever, and now you've realized that it's a whole sea out there. It's a bunch of fish. Where do you fit in? How do you matter? And so helping him even see, because he still struggles every day. I love the kid, but every day is a struggle. He's gonna find the struggle some type of way. And now I'm getting to the point. I'm like, hey, dude, we dealing with this every day. Now you can say that it's everyone else around you. You can keep saying it, but now at this point, it's different groups of people that don't know each other. Who's the problem? And it may not mean that you are literally the problem. It may mean that your thought process about handling situations probably is the problem. You need to rethink the way that you're doing this. So helping kids get to those points where they can not only look at the aha moment, but how I got to the aha moment and how I'm going to be after the aha moment.
What's the biggest misconception people have about purpose and success?
Oh man, I think again it goes back to that big picture. I think so. We can say Adrian winning Grammy Music Educator Award um, is the big picture, right? And and he's done that. But here's the thing: I'm 42, and there's more life to live, so I can't stop after this Grammy. So that's a piece of success, right? But I think realizing how I got to this moment is my purpose, right? Um, what do I do with this accolade that I have there? Do I just walk around and put this the Grammy on my shoulder and walk around and be like, y'all, I got a Grammy. I got a Grammy. This validates what I do. Or do I say, hey, what I do is so validated that the Grammys even want to offer me an award? And so now I got to bring purpose to this Grammy, because now the Grammy needs to represent what I do, right? I think that's a different place of just saying I won an award, or let me validate what this award looks like. Those are two different things. So I think knowing your purpose is being joyful in everything, whether it's the ups and the downs, even the times that it's a no. A lot of people don't understand what to do with the no. Here's what there were several no's that happened this year. I submitted the choir for a couple of conferences. It was some no's that happened. I ran for some couple of offices for state. It was no's there. Um, and did that mean that I needed to stop what I was doing? No, it didn't. But what if I had stopped and gave up? Would I be sitting here saying I'm the Grammy music educator?
Yeah.
You know? Or what if I did stop and give up and I still won? Now, me winning the Grammy means something different because now I'm going to use this Grammy to validate all the people that didn't vote for me. Right? No, it doesn't mean that. It just, knowing your purpose is what will drive you to continue to be great.
Yeah. So I was thinking, you've been in the school system for what, 19 years, right?
19 years now.
So you got into the school system young, right?
Yes, right out of college.
Now, some teachers go in, they're all amped up, they're a geek, they got the degree, let's go teach, change the world, and 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, they don't feel like they feel. Yeah, they burnt out and they're trying to do something else. How in the world are you able to maintain 19 years and you didn't get burnt out?
I found the success in my students. I'm constantly looking at the success in my students. And again, it goes back to that, why am I doing this? It hurts. I'm not gonna lie. It bothers me when I do have a colleague that, I watch complain all year about the students that they teach or the administration or the paperwork, the lesson plans, the things, the day-to-day duties that teachers have to take care of. It kind of bothers me. I'm not going to even lie. That kind of bothers me because it doesn't mean that they are not meant to be in the classroom. It just means that they've lost their why. They've lost their purpose of why they decided to do this.
Have you ever thought about, because you mentor a lot of kids, but have you ever found yourself mentoring teachers to help them find their why?
Oh, you know what? This is, yeah. There have been a couple. I got some friends that have come to me and said, and they were choir directors, and they would say, hey, Adrian, I'm thinking about taking this job, or I'm thinking about leaving this school, or this isn't for me. And, and I tell them, I started off the conversation. I said, you know what? When I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a high school choir director. Like I knew that there was no questions behind it. I knew that. So I'm living my dream. So it would be ill of me to tell you you belong in that classroom. I know why I'm in the classroom. Now you need to figure out why you want to move on. Good friend of mine was always saying, "Hey, I'm ready to move forward. I'm going to go get my master's. I'm going to get my doctorate. Then I'm going to be, directing on the collegiate level." That's all I kept saying. I said, "Okay, I can see you definitely doing that." And friend of mine, I'm waiting to have a conversation with them because I want to congratulate them on figuring out their why, because they made it all the way to the collegiate level, but they're going back to high school because they just said, "I'm not happy doing it here." And the work is not the same when I was teaching high school choir. And so I applaud them because it takes a big step. There might be a pay cut, might be a move to another city. We don't know what that looks like. But for this friend to say, this is not where I'm purposed to be. And we get those moments, right? Where that happens and it's okay. But this person figured out their why and their purpose and they know where they need to go back to doing. So always remembering that why and that purpose. I don't think I've gotten burnt out in a school year as far as the work is concerned, but never burnt out to the point where I've said I need to leave a school. And I've been in some difficult schools, and I've still, been able to see myself being there. I will say this: my first 5 years, 6 years of teaching, I didn't do the traditional route, so I had to go through secondary classes and TPs and stuff like that to earn my degree to be able to teach, certification to be able to teach. Uh, and so my ending at those school years for those schools was not due to me not wanting to be there. It was due to me not having certification. But what I always found interesting about every last one of those schools, I was always planning for the next year. And I was always hurt when I left. I'm like, a lot of those kids, I wonder where they are now. Some of them have reached out to me. Actually met three of them. They own a restaurant in North Memphis, and I've been going over there eating their food. Need to go hit the gym after eating everything that they're cooking. But you know, I I never left those schools because I didn't like the administration, the community. I always saw value in what I could bring in that classroom.
You're not just a leader, you're also a father of two daughters. How has fatherhood shaped your perspective on purpose?
Really good question because I started out talking about how I don't have the best relationship with my father. And the first thing I can remember when my ex-wife and I decided to divorce was that I refused to be what my father was to me, to my girls. I just refused. And it's not putting him down. I don't know the full story why he wasn't there. Not, no hard feelings, no judgment towards him because that's in the past. I can't change that. I don't know what that was. But what I do know is the feeling I got from the absence of him not being there. I couldn't be for my girls. So this is no brag. I'm not trying to earn a super dad shirt or anything like that. But I made sure that when we split up, they saw my face every week. I That was important. They heard my voice. I may have not called them every day, but they knew dad was there. And then when they moved to Little Rock on Fridays, I got in my car after school. I drove to Little Rock, went and picked them up, brought them back to Memphis. They stayed with me for the weekend. Sunday after church, we had dinner. I got on the road, took them back to school. Then they moved to Nashville. An additional hour added, 2 hours added round trip. I did the same thing. It didn't matter how late it was. I did, and I found during those times, those were some of my best moments to just kind of sit and think. Also, um, but I want to make sure that I was impactful. Now, I'm gonna tell you what has been difficult for me, and I feel like I'm guilty of this um, for a while because they were girls and I wanted sons. Um, and they know this. Madison was supposed to be Major. Mackenzie was supposed to be a male Mackenzie. Uh, so they know this. But I got girls. God bless me with girls, and I'm a girl's dad. You look at my bank account and tell I'm a girl's dad. But I sometimes I'm guilty. I was guilty. I'm not saying it anymore. I feel like at times I was guilty of being a parent to other kids versus my own daughters. And so that was a difficult thing of trying to figure out. I need, these kids are wanting to call on me. I need my girls to be able to call on me on the same. So that took me, when we're together, putting my phone to the side. Because again, like you said, I'm a leader. I'm doing all this additional work. So 3 hours on the road is easy to get some conversations out. I can get three, if they're an hour long conversation, I can get three good conversations out and get things done. But then I don't know how how their week went.
Do you find that, because it sounds like you saw your girls on the weekends, right?
Yeah.
Um, do you, would it be part of why you think you went so hard with the students that you had? Because it was almost like a
Yeah.
parent like figure in their lives, right?
Yeah. Probably so. Probably so. Trying to make that investment in kids at some type of way. I think a lot of it was that I saw what the village was doing for me. I wanted to do for for others, but I needed to realize that I needed to do it for my girls as well. And so I would say maybe I feel like the last 5 years I've really been getting it right. Especially since my oldest has moved to Memphis in her junior year at Lemoyne College. Really proud of her. She's finally figured out what she feels like she wants to do in life. I don't think it's quite there, but that's not, daddy's choice. So daddy's, job is to guide her into really figuring out what that should be. But I'm looking at a kid who, and this is what's cool, Tim. I'm looking at a kid who was lost also because she's a pandemic baby. So her last 2 years of high school were over the computer. Then she moves to Memphis and she goes back into the classroom. And so that freshman year was a struggle for her, you know. And I could go to Lemoyne and pull her out that dormitory and beat her butt each day about them grades, right? About peer pressure, about experimenting with different drugs. I can do all of that. her freshman year, but would that be effective as far as, sitting down and having a conversation with her and allowing her to see dad go through some stuff, and dad figure it out. And so her freshman year was difficult. And when we got to the end of the year, and I said, "Baby, this has been a rough year." And she said, "Yeah, Daddy, that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to stay home, and commute back and forth." And the girls had a 3.0 every semester since. So I can see where some changes happened there. My youngest moved to Memphis this year, and oh gosh, Mackenzie is a con artist. Great child. But I see both. It's funny because I see both her mom and me within her. Because she's charismatic. She does not Madison has my introvertedness where she don't, takes a minute to warm up. Mackenzie's not that. Mackenzie walks into a room, she like a mom, she just starts talking. But then she has my mouth, my personality. So she bouncing off the walls once she's really, really comfortable. Um, but being able to be a dad to her, and love on her and make her feel special, make both of them feel special. So I would say I honestly would say the last 5 years, I feel like I've been getting it right.
It has to be a joy to have them both now in the city with you, isn't it?
It is. It is. In the beginning I was all happy. Yay, super dad. And then when I realized, oh, you gotta go grocery shopping. You gotta take them to the store because they need, their feminine products. Wait a minute, one of them not acting a certain way. What's wrong? Oh, so navigating that every day has been different, but it's definitely been a joy because I was, in a bachelor pad Monday through Friday, right? Uh, and then Friday evening, Saturday through Sunday, it wasn't that, but now it's different. They with me 24/7 all, every day week. But being able to find those moments to have family time, um, and they're not, anything big or huge. We may be us all sitting on the couch and starting the first 15 minutes of the movie before dad falls asleep. All those moments are, they're valued by all three of us.
Was there ever moments where you felt like, man, this is tough. I feel like I'm not getting it right, and you worried that, hey, I only got so long to make this
Yeah.
impact. Yeah, was there ever moments like that?
Yeah, dude, I'm still having them. They're still happening. But I'm looking forward to them. So my youngest is at Cordova now, and she went with us to London. And we're preparing to go to London, and there are 34 kids, and she's one of the 34. And we're going to get on the airplane, our international flight. And so every kid needs to have their passport out, their ticket, need to be focused and paying attention. And I'm like, Mackenzie, get over here next to me. I have your passport. I have your ticket. We going through together. And she would come next to me and she'll move away. And I'm like, you finna get jacked up in this Houston airport, and so then it dawned on me, dude, she's trying to be a kid. Let her go. And that daddy moment, like I almost cried right there in the Houston airport because she's watching 33 other kids whose parents are not on the trip doing it and figuring it out on their own. And she simply wanted to do that. So that was a difficult, moment. Matter of fact, I made some Facebook posts about how uh, I hadn't seen my child on this trip. I hadn't seen her on this trip at all until she did some money added to her card. That's when I saw her. So yeah, I would say every day I am, I'm still dealing with those moments where am I getting this wrong or am I getting it right? Trying to be a dad. But I'll tell you one of the things that I love is that my girls know that they can come to me at any point and ask any question. So we built that relationship. Madison is 20, and before she goes to any party or she's going to stay out late, she texts me and say, "Hey, Dad, and I'm like, girl, you 20. If you were in Howard, somewhere like that in DC, you wouldn't be calling to tell me about what this is. Just, I may look on your location and be like, that ain't Howard. I don't know DC well enough. But the fact that she has the respect to just say, Dad, I know I'm grown now. You keep telling me I'm grown, but I want to get your permission. And so I texted her and I told her, she said, it's a party this day, it's a party tomorrow, and I want to go spend the night. And I just texted her. I said, okay, you can do all of this. It's cool. But you're at the point now that you're doing it too much. You're doing it too much. So you need to make a decision. And so she texted me back. She said, okay, I'm gonna do this last party next week. I'm not doing it anymore. So that those moments make me feel good.
Yeah.
You know, Madison not needing me. She at the age of 20, she'll be 21 in September. I was worried about that, but no, she still needs dad, and that makes me feel good. Do I see her every day like I like? No, I don't. When she comes home, does she just come and plop up on the couch? Most days she go in her room and she on FaceTime talking to somebody, and she'll open the door. And the only time I might see her is her march to the refrigerator to get something to eat or to go to the bathroom. Then she go back, but even in that, I'm like, hey, you ain't spoke to me. And so she'll stop and come and speak, and we'll hang out. So yeah, I think that there's a balance there of trying to figure it out. But I will tell you, from one dad to to another, that you're gonna find those moments. They're gonna always need you. They just won't look the same. It won't be all Walt Disney
Yeah,
moments.
yeah.
It'll be it won't be that first going down the slide moment. The moments look different now, but they're definitely gonna be there, and that you'll still feel good about it. You'll know it's gonna validate you as dad.
Your faith has played a huge role in your journey. How has your relationship with God guided you toward your purpose?
Oh gosh. Again, it goes back to that thing of um, understanding that I'm representing multiple entities, right? And so I'm also representing a God fearing man. So I've got to be thoughtful about the way that I walk and talk and everything like that. But then I will say this, I also want to make sure that what I'm doing is pleasing to God. I don't want to be one of those people or I won't say one of those people. I don't want to be a Christian still in his life that's always standing with his hands saying, God, I need, I need, I need. I want my life to honor him. And I want what I do to be my praise and worship, Um, I quote scriptures all the time, um, your gift will make room for you. And I'm looking at because I've been honoring him and I've been delighting myself in the Lord. Um, I don't get every day. I'm not gonna say that I'm one of those people that pray every night before you go to sleep. Some nights, sleep meets me before I can even try to pray. Um, but making sure that I acknowledge him, in the moments. I will say this, that even talking about praying before I go to sleep, or praying first thing when I wake up, I'm a process guy. And so I've dealt with a lot of disappointment in myself because I feel like everything has to happen at certain times. And so realizing that if I didn't wake up right in the morning and start praying, there's no reason why I can't pray on my way to school, or I can't pray while I'm in the shower, or I can't take a moment and just, give him that focus that's due him. So finding times to still acknowledge his greatness throughout the day, I think helps. Quoting the scriptures and remembering those scriptures and allowing them to guide my thoughts, um, are reasons why I feel like he's rewarding me. Um, I will say that there have been times that I've struggled. In those times early in my career, I think God was allowing those struggles to happen because, again, I was thinking about that choir that was in my head, and I wasn't thinking about the Adrian that should be making the most impact or whatever. I was looking for the big trophies versus the trophies that were in front of me and the opportunities to celebrate, the impact and celebrate those individuals that I'm making impact in. So I think putting these moments now first in my life is how I'm delighting God. And I'm not worried about the future as long as that I'm making the impact now and I'm remaining humble. I thought about it the other day. I was like, man, these last couple of weeks I've been, traveling so much that I haven't taken time to just have my own daily meditation. And so I'm turning back over to doing that. Even when I'm working out, I'm worshiping. I'm thanking him. Thank you, God. Not just that I can lift this extra weight and do this next set. But thank you, God, that you're giving me the mind to be able to do this, the strength to be able to do this. I'm not. I tell the kids all the time, the small things count, and so I'm grateful for every small moment.
What sacrifices did you make to get to where you are today?
Oh gosh, That's an interesting question. Now, I'll be honest. When you gave it to me the first time, I kept thinking, I was like, how am I going to answer this question? Because what sacrifices? Because he's not just talking about the sacrifices of not buying new clothes and new shoes and everything like that. To be a father to provide. You're just talking about sacrifices all over. And Tim, I gotta be honest with you. I don't know if I've just really acknowledged the sacrifices that I've made to be where I am. I think I've done some things and put some things aside to make sure that I made sure my purpose came first. You know, because the interesting part is that we quote the scripture that God would give you the desires of your heart. That there have been times that I've pulled back from doing stuff because I'm like, hey, that might be too much. But then I blink and I look up and I'm in that place that I said I wanted to be, and I didn't have to work as hard. So I think, let's say maybe the major sacrifices that I've made is denying myself places where I thought I should be and trusting God to get me there. And I can say, again, I won't say that I've gotten every opportunity, every moment right. But what I can say, from graduating from Philander up until now, God has granted me, and it's weird. Thank you. God has granted me so many desires in my heart that I didn't have to speak. As a kid, I grew up saying, I'm going to be the minister of music at Mount Moriah East. Never had the conversation with anybody at the church. When I graduated from Philander, my pastor called me and said, son, it's time to come home. We never had this conversation, nor do I play an instrument where I can accompany a music ministry. All I do is teach. That's all I do is teach and plan the ministry worship lead. That's all I do. Uh, but I never had that conversation with my pastor and told him I want to be his minister of music. And God gave me that, you know. Um, I wanted to teach at Overton. Thought that's where I was going to be, and interviewed for that job 3 times. And God said, no, that's not where I was supposed to be. He said that. But I kept saying, hey, I want to have a top notch choir. And here's what's funny, I didn't go seeking Cordova. I didn't want to go to Cordova. This is funny. I didn't want to go to Cordova. I wanted to go somewhere else. And I was like, hey, I was telling my supervisor at the time, I'm like, dude, I want to go to this other school. Like, I've been working with their gospel choir. I know the kids over there. He's like, nope, Cordova's where you're supposed to be. And here it is. I wanted to have a top notch program where I was making impactful change in the students and in the community. And God granted me Cordova. He gave me those desires. Um, I wanted to be in leadership, and I never had conversations with anybody about being in leadership. I didn't, I'm not one of those people who says, okay, I'm going to follow behind this person so they can see the works that I'm doing so they can bring me up. You know, I want those positions. I'm not going to even lie. Who doesn't want to, be impactful and have their name called? Who doesn't want to do that? But my method about getting there has never been one that's chasing the dream. I just do the work. And so um I would say that maybe, the sacrifice of denying myself on dreams that I want and allowing them to come. I don't know if that's the right answer that you're looking for, but I will say maybe that is a sacrifice of chasing dreams
Yeah.
and just allowing them to come.
I think anytime you deny yourself or you put things off to handle something else is a form of sacrifice.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can easily not do it, right?
Right.
And it would delay what your purpose is, right? So I think that delayed gratification, any delayed gratification, is a form of sacrifice. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it go back to when my mom told me I was arrogant. So thanks, mom.
that's funny. For someone out there struggling, stuck at a job that they don't like, or feeling lost, what's the first thing they need to do to change their life?
um, Again, it goes back to figuring out their why. Why are you in this position? Why are you doing this? Um, and then two, realizing that how does your piece fit in this puzzle? You know, are you forcing it not to fit? Are you thinking that that big gap in the puzzle, and your puzzle piece is this small is supposed to occupy that space, or is it that your puzzle piece is in the wrong space? I think when you hear people who say, I'm at this job and I'm not enjoying it, they you got to figure out why you're doing it. Um, Again, money and everything, and I'm grateful. There have been a lot of positions that have come at my table, and a lot of positions. I kind of wanted to do like they're big jobs. And I'm like, oh, I can see myself doing it. And they would have been lucrative when it comes to pay. But as far as bringing joy here, the job duties, I was like, it's not worth it. I've had people. I'm still toying with this. I've had people say, Adrian, you need to go back and get your master's and work on your doctorate. And and I'm not gloating about this. This is the statement that was literally made to me. I'm gonna tell you why, Adrian, you need to go back and get it, because you are already sitting at tables and your name is already in rooms with other folk who have their masters and their doctorate, and you ain't got no choice but to do it. And I said, repeat what you just said.
Mm.
You know, um, so when I think about that, I know what my why and my purpose is on my job. Um, and here's what I will also say to people who are finding themselves in that: if you realize that your why and your purpose don't belong there, then before you jump off the ship, you need to figure out where you need to be. You know, um, I don't even mind saying this. I worked when I first got into college. I would come back on the summers, and whenever there was a break, and I was a tour guide at the Civil Rights Museum downtown. When I graduated from college, my pastor called me back home, so I was minister of music. I was making a nice little income from there. Newly married with a daughter. And so I went back to the Civil Rights Museum full time. And towards the end of that, nothing went wrong with the people who were there. I mean, I really enjoyed and felt the value that I was bringing, giving tours and educating folk about the history. And then, not only that, but being able to say, hey, what are you going to do now that you know this information? Triggering that thought part and how they can be activists after learning what they've learned. So that was one thing. But then I started realizing I was like, I'm not enjoying going down here 8 to 5 every day. Um, there were times where the schedule started changing. It was like, you need to work, you need to do Sundays. And when we started this, they knew I was a minister of music. I couldn't do Sundays. It was like, well, you gonna have to do Sundays. Okay, I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do
Mm.
Sundays. So I did them. I just showed up after church. And I told them, it's kind of what I got to do. Because I committed to my church job first. Was it the one that would pay all the bills? No, it wasn't. But I always believed God would provide. Um, but then one day I just woke up and I was like, I'm tired of them telling me what color polo and what khakis to wear to work. And I knew then you're not doing what you enjoy. So I stepped out on some faith and I interviewed with MCS. I filled out an application um, to teach. And I was like, I ain't got no teaching degree. I ain't got all this. Again, one of those moments where God's gonna grant this desire. I don't know how he gonna do it. I'm just gonna step out on faith and do it. And so for folk who are lost in a position and they don't know, they need to figure out their why and their purpose. They decide to do that. And then if they figure out that this is not where it belongs, then where their why and purpose is what they need to seek. And they don't need to chase it. You just put your name out there and trust and believe that God is going to do it and He's going to do it. It may not look the way you want it to look, but it's going to come. It's going to come. Again, I thought I would be doing all of these interviews and all these great things as the director of Overton Choirs, and I'm not there. And there's still a great program. But what I'm doing, where I am, is where I'm supposed to be.
What's one lesson you wish you learned early in your journey?
Not to doubt myself. Definitely not to doubt myself. Again, I told you, growing up as a kid, somebody happy, um, thought they were confident in what they were doing, but not confident to the point where I would step out and show others that I can do it. And I think that's again going back to that. You talk about sacrificing that self doubt. of myself. And trusting God, I think, is somewhat, He don't want us always saying, okay, God, you take the steps. We've got to have the faith. We've got to have that to have Him bring it into to fruition. So yeah, I think. Oh gosh, I think those moments of me being paranoid about different things have always been my deterrent from being great. At moments where I know I could be great, and waiting on someone else to hand it to me. So there have been some moments where I've had to say, okay, God, you've given me this, so let me just go ahead and walk forward and do it. And so I'm still learning how to do that today.
Yeah. What's
Definitely.
the best advice you ever received?
Oh gosh, that you're ready, that you can. Probably the best. Probably the best because I've doubted myself a lot. I really have. Again, I keep this. You want to know the scripture that I've heard for the last 4 days
Was that?
from different people? Your gift will make room for you,
Mm.
and we're watching that. And dude,
So multiple times from
from
different people,
different
but the
people
same
in
scripture.
different different places. So again, I'm in Dallas, and I'm talking with this is the National American Choral Directors Association. So these are directors from everywhere. And they're walking up saying, "Dude, I'm so proud of you. You won this Grammy. I mean, we knew you were going." Again, going back to the Grammy, there were people that were saying, "Maclin, it's yours." And I'm like, "No, it's 2,400 other people. Come on now." And some of these people have been nominated for this award many years. This is my first rodeo, first time doing it. And I was doubting myself then. But I had to remember that he grants the desires. Okay, I'm not gonna cry. He grants the desires though. I didn't think. Go back to when I was a kid. I gave up on this Grammy dream. Gave up. Never thought I would be there. And here I am, 20 plus years later, sitting at the Grammys, taking my daughter to the Grammys as the Grammy music educator. Um, so yeah, when folks started saying your gift will make room. My gift, I've got to protect my gift. I got to be thoughtful in my gift and how I use it, um, because it's making room. And we hear that God will open up the windows of heaven, that He will pour out so many blessings that you won't have room. Dude, my arms are like this right now. I'm trying to keep up, and I want to receive all of them, and I want Him to know that I'm so grateful for each one of them. But I gotta be honest, I wasn't ready, and the way that He's blessing and the things that He's doing in this season, it's not anything that's going to my head. It's definitely keeping me humble. Um, but it's empowering the work that I do, and it's letting me know that that my gift matters. So I that every time I've heard it, even today when I was leaving a church, we had afternoon service, and someone looked at me and she said, it was actually my cousin, I hadn't seen her in some years, and she looked at me, she said, "Adrian, your gift will make room." I've heard that so many times this week.
So you spoke about the Grammy a couple times. What was it like what was the process like? So I don't know if there's a process leading up to it, or you just found out, somebody told you. Like what was all that like?
So so here's what's funny. I've been nominated. There are a bunch of awards for educators where someone can nominate you or you can nominate yourself. Again, here goes that self gratification. I just mama in the back of my head, Adrian, you're arrogant, you're arrogant. So anytime that I've had a moment where I can focus and talk about myself, has always been weird for me. So I never applied for 'em. And so I got nominated for the Grammy. Well, I had students nominating me to start the process. Let me put it that way. Um, to do the Grammy process, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. First time I got it was like 2018. Alexia Johnson nominated me for it, and I told her, sweetheart, I'm gonna go through and do it. And I went through because I realized that she got some type of receipt saying that I filled out the paperwork, and I just put the answers in there, went on, and got a rejection letter. And I was like, okay, I wasn't even trying to go through the process. I'm good. Um, and then Miss Williams, middle school choir teacher, she said, "I nominated you for this award, and you better fill it out because I know you, Adrian." I'm like, "All right, Miss Williams, it ain't in school no more. You can't do nothing." Yeah, I'm gonna fill it out. Then a good friend, Jasmine Fripp, who's the director of choirs at TSU, Tennessee State. She was a top 10 finalist last year, and we were celebrating her all over the place. And she called. She said, "Adrian, why have you never? I just realized I ain't never seen your name on this list." And I said, "Oh, it was on there." And she's like, "No, I know you, brother. And even in our short time of knowing one another, you've never filled out the paperwork." And I said, "Okay." Yeah, that might be true. She said, "Okay, well, you finna fill it out." I said, "Okay, cool." She said, "Well, I'm gonna call you on this day and we're gonna fill it out." I said, "Okay, great." She forgot to call. So then she called me maybe a couple of days later. She said, "Hey, I forgot to call you. You need to call me tomorrow. I got free time. We're gonna work on this." Okay, okay, I'm gonna call you. I didn't call. So then finally, as we got closer to the closing process for the application for submitting, she called and she said, "We filling this out, and I'm not getting off the phone until you do it." And I think I was driving home. I had to pull over and fill it out then. So I filled out that paperwork. That was maybe end of March, somewhere in there, maybe May. Submitted whatever they needed, and then I got an email.
That's last year.
That was last year. Got an email sometime in June saying that out of the 2,400 applicants, you've been chosen as a quarterfinalist. It's 215 of y'all. Here are your next steps. And so I called Jasmine. I said, "Okay." She said, "I already know you one of the top. You one of the top finalists." I went and did some research on my own because I wanted to know where you were in the process. And she said, "All right, we need to make your 3 videos." So there were 3 videos that I had to make. One of me teaching, a testimonial video and talking about the program. So asked some individuals to talk about the impact that I've made, and I, navigated through what a day at Cordova looks like. And then the third video was like a PD video, some technique or strategy that I've mastered that I can share with other teachers to do. Submit your bio, headshot, and a resume, and from there you done. I submitted that stuff at the end of June, maybe 2 days before the deadline, and I'm sitting and you're waiting. And come the end of July, I get an email. You are one of the top 25 semifinalists. I'm like, okay, cool. This is fun. All right, Cordova's gonna get $500. Yay! This gonna be over. Start the school year. Move on. Uh, so I'm that's where my mind is. I'm not at this point. I'm really not taking it seriously. Uh, and then November 5th, voting day. I remember it well. Just finished PD, leading PD at professional development at Overton. And I'm standing around talking to our supervisor and a couple other teachers. And my phone rings. I'm like, this number looks familiar. I'll say, wait a minute, Julie. The only Julie I know works with the Grammys. Let me see what she wants. She's probably calling to tell me I didn't make it. Thank you for the submission and everything like that. "Hey, Adrian, just letting you know that you're one of the top 10 finalists." Oh, wait a minute, this real. This is really happening. And then later I got an email saying that, to look out for maybe an additional phone call um, from our executive director, Harvey Mason Jr., who's over the Recording Academy. And so I'm like, okay, dude ain't got nothing better to do. What he calling for? And so when he called and we were having a conversation, he was congratulating me about, going through the process and reviewing my materials and the impact I'm making. I'm like, all right, come on, can you get this over with so you can call whoever won? And he said, so, we're really excited to let you know that you are our 2025 Grammy Music Educator. And I was like, wait a minute, say that, say that again. What do you say? Um, so when I found that out, dude, I cried. I cried. The first person I called was Miss Williams. And I called her and I was boo-hooing. I said, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. I said, I can't get it out. Nothing's wrong. And so you can hear her breathing with anticipation, like, is everything okay? Where are you? I'm standing outside. It's middle of winter and I'm out on the parking lot at Cordova, no coat on, boo-hooing, crying. And she's like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm on the parking lot. I'm on the parking lot. And I can even scream it. I was like, I won. And we cried, we rejoiced, we thank God. Oh gosh, oh, remembering that moment. But it just to know that the work that I do at Cordova, the impact that I'm making, someone's on this committee looked at this small snapshot that I took and decided to make a decision on that based off of this small snapshot. It's the small things, dude. And we have to remember how we're putting together these small things that they matter. They matter. And so it's been an experience since I found it out. It
Yeah.
really has. Sorry for
It's all good. It's all good.
tears.
I think it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
I can only imagine hearing and because you say you didn't take it serious, and then throughout the process it wasn't taken serious, and as it got closer, it's like, hold on,
Wait a minute, this real.
what did I get myself into?
It's real.
But no, I can only imagine, man, what type of emotions you were feeling because I'm just gonna keep it real. As men, we don't really look for that gratification. We just do it because it knows it needs to be done, and we do it. And then to finally be recognized, whether it's a Grammy or just, hey, you done really good, thank you.
Yeah.
You know that because at times you don't really hear it often, but it feels good to know that, okay, I am making an impact, and that's, I would say, obviously that's kind of the ultimate impact in terms of what you are doing actually matters.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I will say this. I keep thinking about why I was selected and um the change that I'm making, and you never know who's watching. Um you never know whose lives are being changed just by the work. They don't have to be in your room. The number of people that have come to me and said, "Hey, I watch your videos on YouTube." The number of people that said they just watch my Facebook page to wait for me to go live with the students, or just go live because I'm inspiring. And I'm like, me, someone who has for his lifetime, a lot of my life I've always felt like I was the second. I'm not even gonna lie about that. I've always felt that, and so to be in this moment where people have been saying, "No, I've been watching you all along." You know, a friend of mine. Okay, I'm sorry. Friend of mine, Aaron, my pastor's granddaughter. We grew up together, and we had a really great youth department at church. We were definitely family, and so Aaron just recently talked about how I was that person who gave her uh, the self confidence, the confidence within herself to go down the slide. And she talked about how her daughter Omari, she takes her to the park, and she's like, "Omari, come on, we're gonna go down the slide." And Omari's looking at her like, "Nope." Not gonna do it. And she walks Amari up the ladder, and she gets her to the top of the slide, and Amari starts crying because she's looking down, like, "Nope, not gonna do it." And they get in the car and they leave. Next day they show back up to the park, and Aaron's like, "We're gonna conquer this slide." And just so happened this day there are other kids going down the slide. And Amari's looking at them, and she looking at mama like, I don't know, you know? And eventually Amari gets to the point where she climbs up that ladder and she goes down the slide by herself. And Aaron looked at me and said, "Thank you for being those kids." So yep, those moments, realizing that others are watching you. You don't know that others are watching you, but you're changing other people through your actions. And so to get the recognition that I'm doing that. The other thing about the award is I also don't feel like I'm doing anything different from the other 2,400 did in their class. So it also makes me say, "Why me, God?" What I can't take it lightly. I can't take it lightly. I don't know. I don't know. Everybody keep asking, "What's the next?" I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is in this moment that I'm in, I'm going to be very careful with how my footsteps are and the words that I have. I'm gonna be very, because I'm grateful.
All right. Final question. If this was your last chance to speak to millions of people about finding your purpose, what would your message be to them?
Uh, literally, literally, take your time. Don't rush it. You know, don't rush it. It's going to come. Remember that the small things count. Uh, Remember that we are all pieces of the puzzle, and if we're not there, the puzzle's never going to be complete. It's never going to be complete. Remember that you're always working to be the best version of yourself. You're not going to get everything right. You're going to have to take some moments where you're going to have to step back and reevaluate why you're doing things. Know your why, know your purpose, and definitely, if I'm speaking to those who are God fearing, put God first in everything, you know. And if if there are those who are not God believing people, um, make sure that you're putting good energy out. Definitely, definitely. Make sure that every time that you enter a room, whether it's you're opening the door for someone, you're picking trash up, um, no act is too small to make change. Just remember that.
I've always said that I have so much respect for anybody in education. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of denying self,
Yeah,
and at times it takes a lot of your own resources.
yeah,
Right. So I got so much respect for anybody in education. My dad's a principal, so it's like
okay,
I've
yeah.
kind of heard it firsthand about things, and he's been in the school system for over 30 years. So
I'm working to get to 30.
so I got a lot of respect. And then just to hear your story, how you're pouring back into the youth. I mean, the legacy in terms of a question didn't come up. It's just e- everybody that I know Adrian has touched, as a piece of him walking around, and as all these students that you've touched. So I don't know how many classes you have per day, how many people are in the class, but once I started doing the multiplication on that,
Dude.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about a serious impact
yeah,
on a community.
yeah.
So their respect for you is amplified, man. The fact that you are a teacher, the fact you are still in, the fact that you are in your purpose, and the fact that you're just making an impact on students. Like, much respect to you,
Thank
and I certainly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule
you.
to be here.
Crazy right now. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
crazy schedule.
yeah. So no, so certainly appreciate that, and hopefully we can have you back in the future for other shows that we may be doing. So.
Man, I'm definitely honored to have been asked and to see the work that you're doing and asked to be a part of it. So definitely grateful and definitely have enjoyed this time with you.
And I appreciate it, bro.
No problem, guy.
Listen, if this didn't get you fired up from this conversation, you might need to check your pulse. Adrian's just dropped some life-changing gems. And if you weren't taking notes, rewind this and get your notebook out. Here's the challenge. This week, take one step toward your purpose. I don't care if it's small, just take a step. And don't keep it to yourself. If this episode inspired you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and send this to someone who needs to hear it. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you're listening on Spotify, follow and leave a review. And remember, purpose doesn't wait, so go make it happen.